Well, I think that once again, we possibly could be on the internet.
Again, where was this information, Carl?
I Googled it last time in between the segments, and I said, if you do podcast things, do you go on the internet? And Google said yes.
Do you remember how we talked about how Google sometimes lies?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Just clarifying.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Welcome to the S.H.A.R.E podcast, where we talk about sex, relationships, and culture. This is our Real Talk segment where we get to just have a conversation. It's going to be so good. Joining us today is a lovely guest who we will introduce in a moment. But before we do that, we're going to give our names, education, work, quirk, and passions. Again, because people might not be listening to the pilot. If you missed the pilot, you should go listen to it. It's awesome. It features our amazing executive director, Lois Benham-Smith. She is our fearless leader at Atwell, and she is incredible. You definitely want to go back and check that out. But if you are here now, which obviously you are because you're listening or watching, my name, I'll start it off, is Carl.
Hi, Carl.
Hi. My education is in pastoral ministry. I have a bachelor's in pastoral ministry with an emphasis in worship and the arts. I'm kind of an artsy guy. And I also have a master's in biblical literature. So all the Bible things, basically my education involved just reading a whole lot.
Sounds like it.
Yes. Work. I am the S.H.A.R.E director. So sexual health and relationship education director at the Atwell Center. Quirk, I mentioned again in the pilot, we talked about it for way too long, that I smell everything that I have to eat, or drink. I have to smell it first. It's a weird quirk. I don't know why I do it. I don't have any trauma around it. I'm just weird.
Okay.
And passion, I love music. I have always loved music, love singing. I've been a part of worship bands and did a little bit of professional vocal work in a previous life. So I love everything music. But you, weird person to my left, what is your name?
My name is Kassia Stevenson. I studied child and youth care at Mohawk College in Hamilton, and I'm currently working at Atwell with the S.H.A.R.E program and also at a homeless shelter for youth downtown. I'm going to give a different quirk and passion. I think the last time changed things up. So a quirk of mine is I don't like tomatoes.
What?
Yeah, but I like ketchup. And there's certain things where if there's tomatoes in it, I'm okay. My favorite food has a tomato paste base, and I don't mind it, but the thought of eating a tomato is very repulsive to me.
That is odd. I like it. I like it. It's a super good quirk.
Yeah, I thought so. Thank you. And then a passion of mine would be traveling, and when I'm traveling, to continue drinking coffee, because coffee's great.
Coffee is so good.
Yes.
And now we are going to introduce I'm so excited. This person actually was in charge of the S.H.A.R.E program before I was. And so please, mystery person, introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello everyone. You guys are so fun. You're going to have to remind me to participate. I'm just listening, laughing.
That's great.
Wow, good times. My name is Michelle Bear. So I used to work at the Atwell Center doing the S.H.A.R.E program. So it's so fun being back with so many familiar faces. Now I am working as a qualifying psychotherapist in Brantford, and so that means I am doing that very part-time right now because I also have a little baby at home.
Congratulations.
So thank you. Yeah, so mostly I'm in the mom kind of headspace.
Love it.
And then I do a little bit of psychotherapy on the side right now, but I'll be returning to that more once my son is a little bit older, and love doing that work. So I have an undergrad in psychology and then a master's in clinical counseling as well. Yeah.
That's awesome. And what's a quirk and what's a passion of yours?
Okay.
Big questions.
Okay, yes. So a quirk. It's kind of maybe this isn't a good quirk to mention on a podcast, but you can also see me because we are being filmed.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Not that I'm going to demonstrate it, but it might just be easier to explain. If I put my arm straight on a table, I can like turn it all the way around.
Oh.
Flat. So I can like twist my arm 360 degrees. And
Oh my.
I'll be honest, the last time I tried that was a few years ago, so I'm not going to try it again in
Okay.
case I cannot do it anymore.
Okay.
And it ends up in me being, going to the hospital. So I'm not
Yeah.
going to try that right
let's
now.
not do that.
But it was pretty fun to whip out at like, youth group events,
Yeah.
that sort of thing at camp when people are like, asking about quirks.
That's a pretty good one.
We'll see what happens after the show. Okay. Maybe that'll come up in the B-roll somewhere. I don't know.
Okay.
And,
Stay tuned.
What's a passion of yours, Michelle?
Yeah, a passion. So I have always loved sports. I played rep basketball and soccer as well, and played both those in university as well. So I would say that's still a passion, although, again, haven't played in a while since COVID and then momming, although I am playing soccer right now. And it's mostly just a success when I can like run up and down the field and not
work your way
huffing
back
and
up.
puffing. Yeah, you got to give yourself some time. But I would definitely say like athletics in general would be a passion.
That's so cool. I loved playing soccer indoors. They used to do like indoor soccer.
Yeah.
And they would always put me in the goal, like be the goalie.
Yeah.
Because I am a bigger guy. But I also just like getting hit in the face with soccer balls. It's great.
That's a
You like that
weird
part.
quirk.
Yeah, because then you just feel that you've blocked a point and you feel very accomplished afterwards.
Yeah.
I think I would feel pain.
You know, I don't feel pain, Kassia.
Being a goalie is a hard job.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of pressure. You must be an adrenaline junkie if you like being a goalie.
It was fun. It
Yeah.
was fun.
I think we have different definitions of fun.
That's probably very, very true. Michelle, one of the reasons why we have you here is one, because just want to acknowledge all of the wonderful work that you have done for the S.H.A.R.E program, and thank you. Coming on board after you, it made my job so much easier to have so much amazing content to bring into schools and to talk to youth and to parents and educators about. And so it's an honor, honestly, just to have you here. So thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
That's so kind. You're giving me more credit than I deserve, but I will take it.
We definitely are giving it to you. It was so great. And one of the reasons that, again, that we wanted to bring you on is because you are a professional in your field. And you're also now a parent, and you talk to parents a lot. And some of the questions that we get from parents and educators, I think that you are just so qualified to answer. And one of them is, as I look at my phone, it's in your own experience dealing with clients, parents, educators, have you noticed a difference in the emotional health of clients who have been given the freedom to talk about sexuality, relational health versus people where talking about these things has at best been ignored and at worst shamed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maybe to provide some context, I'll start by saying, so my work is primarily with families. So what that looks like is a lot of parent support. So I think, in full disclosure, the fact that I have a 7-month-old son means obviously I haven't done a whole lot of the parenting stuff yet, other than just try to keep the little human alive. So most of my interactions with parents has come from doing psychotherapy with parents, trying to support them, whether it's they have children who are adolescents, younger. And then through the S.H.A.R.E program as well, we worked quite a bit with parents, having conversations that were educational about sexual health and relationship education, or kind of just more Q&A style, like, hey, I'm reaching out because I have some questions. So just wanted to provide some context. So that would be the majority of the work that I've done with parents, is kind of in those two contexts. So now to dive into that question, I think there's a lot there. So first off, just absolutely that children who have grown up in houses where shame is kind of used as a method or a tactic almost to guide or reprimand or to shape a child, there are quite detrimental outcomes to shame. So the research is quite clear, actually, that shame has a higher correlation with addiction, with secrecy across all areas of life, with lying behaviors that are lying that's quite pervasive, again, across lots of areas, not just necessarily even the one area that was shamed, but it kind of can carry over into many areas. And all of those things, of course, are going to contribute to overall social and emotional struggling, whether that is in the context of relationship with family, with a romantic relationship, or then parenting for themselves. So that was a long way to say, yes, shame is quite destructive. I'm sure both of you and many of the listeners will have heard of the researcher Brené Brown. She's done a lot of groundbreaking work on shame, and she makes a really key distinction between shame and guilt. And that's an important distinction because we kind of use them interchangeably, but they're really quite different. So shame is when someone has the thought or feeling that I am bad, destructive, gross, defective. It's something about me innately, who I am, the core of my being, that is flawed. Whereas guilt is more reflective of my behavior or a choice that I've made. So guilt is I have done something wrong. I have made a bad decision here and I've kind of missed the mark. And so that's an important distinction because shame can actually lead a child or adolescent or adult to feeling like, you know what, I'm kind of stuck because we can't fix innately who we are, something that's just a part of the fiber of our being. We can't fix that. So if I can't fix something that is so innately flawed with who I am, what am I going to do? I'm just going to hide it.
Yeah.
I'm going to just cover that part of me up, and I'm going to, instead of kind of being honest and genuine with who I am, I'm going to kind of mold into a version of myself according to the people that I'm around and trying to impress or fit in with. And it's not out of a desire to be manipulative, but out of a desire just to be accepted and loved, because someone doesn't feel accepted and loved if they are feeling shameful.
Yeah.
In contrast, guilt is actually correlated with a higher self-esteem and a higher sense of self-worth, which is interesting because if you were to say, I have messed up here, I've missed the mark, it's actually kind of presupposing that I actually am better than this.
Yeah.
Who I am at my core is actually someone of better character. For example, if I tell a lie, if I'm feeling shameful, I'm saying, I am so messed up and broken, and who I am is just flawed.
Yeah.
I am a liar. Guilt is going to sound more like, I am not a liar. I missed the mark and made a big mistake. And my behavior of lying is not in accordance with who I am, not in accordance with my values. So when we feel guilt, we're actually able to kind of do a self-assessment to say, I actually have more self-worth than that way that I just acted and that with that choice that I made. So what I need to do is I need to course correct a little bit. I need to make a different decision next time. And that might lead someone actually to lean into relationships with people that they respect and trust around them to say, hey, you know me, you know that I'm kind of better than how I've been acting. I've been struggling with some area in my life and I need some help. Because you know that it's not me that's defective, it's just this behavior that I'm really struggling with. Can you help me? Can you actually speak truth and wisdom into me and I can trust you and I can make some different decisions next time and figure out a plan for how to do that successfully. Whereas if I'm feeling shame, I'm not going to present that part of myself to someone else. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so
a lot of sense.
Great. Yeah. In our program, when we go in to talk to young people about sex and healthy relationships and creating boundaries, the conversation is so on point with exactly what you're talking about, because we talk about how do you create a good boundary, and how do you let other people know what your boundaries are.
Yeah.
And we talk about how hard and how difficult it is sometimes to inform people of what our boundaries are, because we don't want to, stir the pot, or because we want them to like us. So we might be flexible with our boundaries. We might allow our boundaries to be porous, because if people don't like me, then I might not like myself, and maybe I have that shame that I'm carrying. Whereas if you're honest, or if you hurt someone, or if you lie to somebody, or if there's a relationship that has tension, that there's actual confidence, and the relationship gets better by going and apologizing or owning your mistakes, which is that guilt piece that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Other than, aside from that shame, don't hide. Even if it's a hard thing to do, if you're in conflict with a friend or in a relationship, and you've done something to hurt somebody or said something that you didn't mean, it's okay to apologize.
Yeah.
And it's actually the healthier thing, and feeling those things are really good. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that young people are hearing that message, because it's really hard if we haven't practiced those behaviors from a young age. It's really hard to develop them as we're older. And that's why, parents, I'm sure, feel the heavy burden of kind of implementing and teaching their kids some of this stuff from a young age, because it can be so helpful. But I do also always speak to parents who, we might be having these conversations in a psychotherapy context where a child is, really struggling with lying or addiction or something like that. And so we're talking about shame, and they might say, uh-oh, is it too late? Depending on how old my kid is, like, have I permanently messed them up? What has happened here? And I really urge any parent listening to this, or any parent that I'm talking to in a work context, to say, it's not too late. You don't have to be scared. It's just really important to know that research, again, is clear that kids don't need perfect parents. They need what I say is good enough parents.
Yeah. So if a parent were to ask, okay, maybe I've fallen into this, and what is shame, and how do I know if I'm doing it? How would you answer that question?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, because it can be hard to recognize, because again, so much of what we do as parents is what we were brought up with. So we might not even know the alternative or what it looks like. So I think identifying it is a great place to start. If you're thinking, okay, I want to not use shaming language or shame as a tactic in my parenting, how do I even know if I'm doing it? So it's a good question. So I would say it can actually take a lot of different forms, shame. One of the kind of silent but violent forms, as I like to say, is actually just not talking about a subject at all. That's kind of obviously a part of a child's life. If we never name it, never talk about it, it implies something is weird or gross or uncomfortable or wrong with this. And so we just shouldn't be addressing it. And of course, that relates a lot to conversations about sex and anything to do with sexuality, is if it's just kind of never really addressed, or addressed very rarely, kids are going to pick that up. They're going to be saying, yeah, you know what? Why we don't talk about this, but I know it exists. And I go to school or the internet or Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok or whatever the latest thing is. I'm getting up there. I don't know anymore what the kids are on even.
That all sounds about right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cassie.
We all look to Cassie.
Yeah, I need,
what are the
needed
things?
some affirmation.
Yes, you're on point.
Okay. So they know that these are realities that they're going to encounter. So if it's never discussed at home, that can just be shaming in and of itself. So a great place to start is just to recognize, are there any things that I know my child is going to encounter, and I'm just not talking about it because I feel maybe uncomfortable with it? Another way that shame can happen is by how we process through other people's lives with our kids. So, for example, we're watching a movie, a TV show, we're talking about a friend, a person from church or school, and we're real-time processing someone else's decisions. A kid is listening, and if a kid is hearing their mom or dad say, yeah, that was a horrible thing that person did, and this is why, and it's not attributed to the behavior, but it's kind of attributed to they're just clearly a really messed up person. They're just clearly really, they're just not good in this area. Or if it's kind of that was really gross, or what they did or what they're struggling with, it's really disgusting, that sort of thing. Again, a child is going to recall that conversation when they're processing through, do I want to talk to mom and dad about this? Mm-hmm. So how you process through kind of other people's lives can be a helpful tool to teach your child about your child's life, actually. And then something else can be tone of voice. So it's not always necessarily how you the words you speak, but it can be how you speak those words. So again, if you're using a tone that is clearly you're really uncomfortable, you're disgusted, you're fearful, again, just kind of being aware of that mode of communication. Mm-hmm. And then also any sort of time you're speaking about your child's behavior, if you're using language that assumes that your child's intentions were negative, that can be shaming. So let me use an example. If a child, and again, since this is the S.H.A.R.E podcast after all, let me just dive in with a real life example. If a child were to Google something about pornography.
Sure.
And parents going, why would you do that when you know that's wrong? Why would you look at this when that's disgusting, what you're looking at? That is corrupt and wrong, and you know all of the things wrong with not only what you're watching, but the fact that you want to do that in the wrong context and blah, blah, blah. There's so much that can be said about it, right?
Yeah. So
there's tone there. I'm clearly angry or frustrated. That's going to communicate something just in and of itself. And then it's also assuming your child was out to do something disgusting when that probably wasn't their intention.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. Yeah.
Their intention was probably to do something that's actually normal. And normal doesn't necessarily mean okay. It just means a part of the human condition, a part of developmental curiosity that is natural. And again, it's okay to say, this is what healthy looks like, and this is what unhealthy looks like. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to distinguish and talk about right and wrong and those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So we don't need to stray away from those conversations. We can guide. But we want to steer away from saying, but why would you do that? Clearly, you're just looking for trouble, and clearly you're just, something is wrong with you that you're looking for this.
Yeah. It sounds so much like instead of labeling the person, you're actually addressing the behavior and then asking questions about, well, what was the motivator behind this behavior?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it, Carl. That's right.
So good.
Yeah. And so again, it's just kind of, your kid is probably saying, I was honestly just curious what something looked like, or kids at school were talking about something. And is it wrong for a child to have questions and to go to the internet? I'm pretty sure earlier on this episode we were talking about
the internet.
We go to the internet for answers. So a child wasn't necessarily seeking out. They didn't necessarily know what they were seeking out when they were just looking for some answers.
Especially if they've never been exposed to, heard about it, talked about it.
Exactly. So looking for answers in itself isn't really a wrong behavior. It can translate into something that is unhealthy, of course. And so that's when we do need to step in and we need to guide and educate and have that conversation about what is good and healthy for us. Mm-hmm. But it's different than saying, just why would you do that?
Yeah.
So along those lines, like, what could a parent do if they recognize that they have been shaming in the past?
Yeah. First of all, again, is to give yourself some grace, because we're all going to use shame sometimes. We have all been shamed in our lives, and it's going to seep out of us at times. But starting there is, you need to recognize as a parent if you are feeling shame about this topic or another topic. Sex, again, is just going to be a big one where we ourselves as parents feel a lot of shame. Maybe we feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And if you are struggling with shame, as a mom or a dad, it's going to sometimes eke out into your parenting. And so you want to start off by just addressing your own shame. That's probably the number one thing you can do. Parents come to me about all sorts of different issues, and the advice they don't like to hear, but I give almost for every issue is reflect on your own life. So if your kid's struggling with anxiety, reflect on your own relationship with anxiety. If your kid is struggling with lying, reflect on your own relationship with lying and truth and that sort of thing. And it's going to be the same with shame. So if you have used some shaming, where does that come from? Give yourself some grace. And I mean, time to plug a therapist, maybe talk to a therapist about that sort of thing. That could be really helpful. Next, if you're looking kind of for some vernacular, some vocabulary you can use, is the phrase, it's really normal, fill in the blank, or it's really normal that we're curious about sex. It's really normal that you have some questions about sex. It's really normal that you wanted to know what it looks like. It's really normal that you're wondering about masturbation, about porn, about whatever. You can fill in the blank. It's really normal is a really helpful phrase because it helps your kid know they're not alone, right? Because if it's normal, it means other people are struggling with it, wondering about it, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's also just going to be really helpful as a starting point for your child to know, if I'm going to be met with the phrase, that's pretty normal, I'm just more likely to come to my mom and dad to say, hey, I'm struggling with
That
this.
is so good. Yeah.
Right? They're going to lean into those conversations. And then again, always time to say, but this is why it's not healthy to look at porn, or this is why we need to talk about what's healthy for our bodies and what sexuality can look like when it's optimal and healthy and that sort of thing.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us on this first Real Talk episode. Great question and answer, I feel, about shame and how to have these conversations with parents and educators about, talking and addressing issues that we all struggle with and things that we're all going to deal with, and how to facilitate conversation instead of hide. And I really am going to take that from this conversation as like, we want to facilitate conversations, and here's some tools that you can do. I love it's very normal to feel
that's
X,
a good
Y,
one.
Z,
Yeah.
or it's very normal that you're curious about, but now let's talk about it. It's a perfect way to open up conversation, which is what our goal is. I mean,
this was a really good way to kind of start us off and even take this into future episodes. So
for sure.
With your guests, when they come into this podcast and they're ever feel uncomfortable, you just say to them, it's normal.
It's normal.
Yeah.
It's normal. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Michelle. And thank you guys for listening in. And remember, this is why we share.
This is why we share.